Whether editing videos or creating 3D graphics, a laptop with a fast CPU and GPU goes a long way, as it'll provide a smoother experience and allow you to complete renders or exports faster. To further improve your workflow, you'd want to look for a laptop with a fast SSD and plenty of ports, especially USB-C ports with USB 4 or Thunderbolt 4 support. Here we have come up with the top 4 best workstation laptops in the market. You will find them not only informative but also insightful. Let's get started with the video then. And don't forget to check the product link in the description. Number 1. MSI WS76 Workstation Laptop. The best workstation laptop we've tested is the MSI WS76, a premium Windows laptop. You can configure it with an Intel 11th General H Series CPU, an NVIDIA RTX A3000 or A5000 GPU, and up to 64 GB of memory and 2 TB of storage. There are a few display options, including a 1080p 144Hz panel and a 4K 120Hz panel with full Adobe RGB coverage, so you can choose one that best suits your needs. Its wide port selection includes USB-A, USB-C/Thunderbolt 4s, an HDMI 2.1, Ethernet, and a full-size SD card reader. Performance-wise, this laptop can easily handle demanding workloads like video editing and 3D CAD, so you get a smooth experience with minimal lag or stutters. Plus, it has certification from various software vendors to ensure that applications run properly, like AutoCAD, Maya, and SolidWorks. As for portability, it isn't overly bulky for a 17-inch laptop, but it's a 17-inch laptop nonetheless and is quite heavy. The battery lasts over 7 hours if you only perform light tasks, but for intensive workloads, you'll likely get a little over an hour. For Mac users, we recommend the Apple MacBook Pro 16 or the Apple MacBook Pro 14. Both laptops perform almost identically, so it's just a matter of size preference. The downside is that some applications might not have been updated to run on an ARM-based SoC, so you need to check that the software you use works properly on Apple Silicon. One thing to know is that Apple has already released the M2 MacBook Pro 14 and 16, which are reportedly 20% faster. They also have some minor upgrades, like the addition of Wi-Fi 6E and HDMI 2.1. If you're shopping now, go with the M2 model unless you can find an M1 model at a heavily discounted price. Number 2. Lenovo IdeaPad Gaming 3. The Lenovo IdeaPad Gaming 3 is a 15.6-inch budget gaming laptop. Like many gaming laptops in its price range, such as the HP Victus 16, it's available with powerful CPU and very capable GPU options. However, it compromises in other aspects to make it more affordable. This model has AMD Ryzen 5000 CPU and NVIDIA dedicated GPU options, but there are also models with Intel 11th Gen CPUs, under the model name Lenovo IdeaPad Gaming 3i. The AMD Ryzen 7 5800H and NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3050 configuration we tested can deliver a good gaming experience, but its 8 GB of memory in a single-channel configuration severely limits its performance, leading to lower than expected frame rates in games, so you need to make sure to get 16 GB of memory in dual-channel mode to get the most performance out of the CPU and GPU. Our Lenovo IdeaPad Gaming 3 has an AMD Ryzen 7 5800H CPU, an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3050 dedicated GPU, 8 GB of memory, and 1,256 GB of storage in the form of a 256 GB PCIe NVMe SSD and a 1 TB 5400 RPM hard drive. You can also configure the laptop with an AMD Ryzen 5 5600H, which isn't as fast as the Ryzen 7 5800H, but still powerful enough to provide smooth gameplay. As for the GPU, the entry-level NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1650 is the lowest-end option and can achieve around 60 frames per second at 1080p, though you'll have to play at low settings in most games. The NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3050 and RTX 3050 Ti are a decent step up from the GTX 1650 and perform fairly similarly, with the RTX 3050 Ti being only marginally better than the 3050. Both GPUs can get around or slightly over 60 frames per second at high settings. The NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3060 is the highest-end configuration and will provide the best performance, with average frame rates around 80 to 100 frames per second at 1080p. Number 3. Excalibur PC ROG Zephyrus G14. The Asus ROG Zephyrus G14 model GA402R is a high-end gaming laptop with a thin and light design. It replaces the GA401 model from 2021 with AMD Ryzen 5000 series CPUs and NVIDIA RTX GPUs, and it competes directly with the Razer Blade 14. There are many changes in this 2022 model, as it switches to a 1610 display and an all-AMD system, with a Ryzen 6000 CPU and Radeon RX 6700S and 6800S GPUs. Asus has also added an MUX switch to allow for better performance, a 720p webcam, and a microSD card reader. Our Asus ROG Zephyrus G14 has an AMD Ryzen 9 6900HS CPU, an AMD Radeon RX 6700S GPU, 16GB of memory, and 1TB of storage. The AMD Ryzen 6900HS is the only CPU option. You can upgrade the GPU to an AMD Radeon RX 6800S if you want better performance. There are two memory configurations, 16GB and 32GB, but only a single 1TB storage option. You can choose between two color schemes, Moonlight White or Eclipse Gray. The Asus ROG Zephyrus G14 is decent for media consumption. The display is sharp, bright, and colorful, though it isn't the best option for darkroom viewing as its low contrast makes blacks look gray in dim settings. Likewise, the speakers get reasonably loud, but they have no bass and sound muffled. The Asus ROG Zephyrus G14 is excellent as a workstation. Its AMD CPU and GPU have enough processing power to handle demanding tasks like video editing and 3D animation, and it has a sharp QHD display with a wide color gamut, which is great for content creation. The keyboard feels comfortable to type on for hours, and its wide port selection includes an HDMI port and two USB-Cs that can also output a video signal to an external monitor. Unfortunately, it gets hot and loud under load, and there's some thermal throttling on the GPU. Number 4. Lenovo Legion 5. The Lenovo Legion 5 Gen 615 is a lower mid-range gaming laptop. It's a step above the budget-oriented Lenovo IdeaPad Gaming 3 but sits below the Legion 5 Pro and the Legion 7 in Lenovo's lineup. It's very similar to the IdeaPad Gaming 3 in design, user experience, and configuration options. However, it has an additional QHD display option and GPUs like the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3070 and the AMD Radeon RX 6600M GPU. Our Lenovo Legion 5 has an AMD Ryzen 5 5600H CPU, an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3050 dedicated GPU, 8GB of memory, and 256GB of storage. If you need better multi-thread performance, you can upgrade the CPU to an AMD Ryzen 7 5800H, which has more cores and threads. The NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1650 is the lowest-end GPU option and can provide a 60 frames per second gaming experience at 1080p, though you'll have to play at low settings in most games. The RTX 3050 and 3050 Ti are very similar and will get you around or slightly above 60 frames per second with medium or high settings, with the 3050 Ti being only marginally better. The AMD Radeon RX 6600M is roughly the equivalent of an RTX 3060. The performance will vary depending on each game's optimization. The RTX 3070 is the highest-end GPU available and the best option to pair with the QHD 165Hz display. The Lenovo Legion 5 is excellent as a workstation. It's available with powerful CPUs and GPUs that can handle demanding tasks like video editing, programming, or 3D rendering. The fans get pretty loud under load, but there's no noticeable throttling on the CPU or GPU, which is great for heavy, sustained workloads. It has a wide port selection that includes an HDMI 2.1 and plenty of USB ports, so you likely won't need a dock to plug in all of your peripherals. The memory and storage drive are user replaceable, though it isn't easy to access the internals.